Hey, everybody, welcome to With Thunderous Applause, a podcast where two friends get together and talk about the events and ideas that will shape our uncertain future. I am your host, Steve, along with my co host, Zach. What is up?
Nothing much, dude. Watering plants, waiting for the semester to end.
Yeah, it's kind of a dreary day today, but I think it's the last one. They modified the forecast back, so we're not going to hit triple digits this week, according to the 10-day, which is
Yeah.
nice. Just
Got it at
mid 90s.
97 for here. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're going to be mid 90s for like 1 or 2 days, but otherwise it's going to be like in the mid 80s, which is like it's warm, but like in a place that regularly gets to 110, 85 is fucking fantastic.
When I got all I made sure I was like, got to get all my shit that requires me moving around a whole lot done. So I like parked my car out on the street and assembled a worm bin in the garage over
Nice.
the weekend. Let me tell you, it barely fit through the gate. I did not think to measure that.
I'm glad there wasn't a problem.
I got most of the way down, and I was like, I could probably get it like halfway over the fence, have my wife hold it, grab it from the other side, be okay. No, let's just try and get it through the gate.
Yeah. Um I was out planting grapes today. I
Oh,
planted one
nice.
called Niagara, which is a green grape. It's actually where most white grape juice comes from. And
Okay.
then seed, I think it's seedless. It might have seeds. And then the other's a tomcat. It's actually a hybrid of two different species of grape. Um
Oh,
it can
no, neat.
tolerate shade, and one of its genetic parents is the same. I think it's very similar to the California grape, which grows in the
Mm,
shade um all over the place. It's a native plant. The grapes aren't that great, but this is a hybrid, so should have better characteristics. It's crossed with a Thompson, which is where
Oh,
you
yeah,
get
yeah.
purple grape juice. And it's just a table grape. So I'm pretty excited, but I planted that in a spot that gets probably 5 or 6 more hours of shade than elsewhere, and I suspect it to do fairly well there. There's not a lot that grows under there, so it's like behind a pecan tree, so it's shaded all summer until the pecan drops its leaves in like November.
Mm,
So at any rate, I'm either going to let that kind of sprawl onto the ground to create a ground cover, or I'll probably come in with Dutchman's pipe vine, which is another kind of sprawly native climby guy that appreciates the shade.
mm,
Yeah, just working. Working.
yep.
At any rate, we got a decent show today. We're back. It's Monday. It's our big
Hey,
ideas show,
we're doing Monday.
rather than news items. Although we tend to kind of get big ideas squeezed into daily news like we did last Thursday,
That's true.
talking about peak minerals or whatever, and the
Peak
consequences
copper.
for the industrial economy. Go ahead.
Peak copper. Yeah, yeah.
Peak copper.
Just it's
Yeah,
peak everything. Like you name something, we're gonna reach a peak.
it is. We're peak ideas too.
That's true. Everyone does seem to be out of ideas to fix anything that doesn't involve just moving forward and hoping for the best, because it's
Yeah.
worked in the past.
And I was thinking within cultural production as well.
Mm.
They're just kind of rehashing old stories. And I mean, there's some new ones, but by and large, it's the same shit over and over
Oh
and over
yeah.
again.
Well, and the thing is, it's gotten so audacious that it's not even like, oh look, it's this thing skinned a little different. It's like, no, no, we just took your favorite, nostalgia bait,
Remember
and
berries.
yeah,
Remember?
yeah, yeah, yeah. We made those reboots based off your member berries.
That's
You
right.
might say we pressed our member berries into a fine wine.
Into it and allowed it to turn to vinegar.
Yeah.
All right. So today we're talking about Europe.
Yep, yep.
When we first kind of started working on what we wanted to do with this channel, we intended to kind of break it into various kinds of segments. One of which would be European politics and culture, and we were going to call it Holocrons across the pond. Um, a holocron, hopefully because hopefully you like Star Wars, um, is like just kind of a box that contains information. Not always, not always a visual representation, although you see some kind of like holographic images in holocrons. but sometimes it's literally just like a spirit that like communicates telepathically with you. Um, but at any rate, a holocron is just a device for holding energy. And across the pond, of course, we mean Europe,
Yep.
across the Atlantic. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the economic situation in Europe, which is pretty similar to us, but I think that uniquely the European situation is a crisis of our making, our meaning the United States.
It seems like most of the crises these days are
Yeah.
somehow linked back to us.
And we didn't even include a lot of this, but a lot of politicians recently have been like using the language of vassal. They're like,
Yeah.
Europe's basically a vassal of the United States. Like they don't really have any sovereignty, and they're starting to politicians there are starting to push back.
Yep.
Um,
I saw a video where Macron, came out and after one of
Meeting
our
with Xi
representatives,
Jinping, yeah.
yeah, basically said like, oh yeah, we, and he meant like all the European countries are going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And Macron came out and said like, don't speak for us. We're not your vassal. We will do what is in the best interest of France. And no matter what the United States says.
Yeah,
Yep.
and Germany is one of the largest economies in the world, and
Yeah.
it is the center of economic power in the European Union, and it is up until recently has been a major industrial, like considerable industrial output. I think possibly on par with or slightly more than the US. They produce a lot, and a lot of like high end stuff too, like my captive bolt gun. No American companies make that,
Hmm.
and so we buy high end German equipment. I mean, I use it once or maybe a couple times a year on average, and it's like a $400 piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
it's
mean,
like it's durable and it's well manufactured and all that. So there's a lot of technical goods, a lot of machines are made in Germany. Like Siemens is a gigantic company and also a really interesting name for a company. Um,
doesn't mean the same thing.
and there's others, but they're, capital is capital, right? It's become a transnational phenomena and isn't really contained within borders. But German manufacturing has been a big deal. So we're going to talk a little bit about the energy situation and how that's led to inflation, and then we're going to talk about some of the blowback. Right?
Right. Right.
Cool. So
Uh,
let's
it
roll. We got
is.
to. Are we
I was
starting
going to
with
say it
Richard
is.
Wolf? Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
we will. Yeah. I was going to say it is. It is pretty interesting how
Mhm.
in the American context, if you want to say something's cheap, you say it's made in China. You want to say something's or a good, it's made in Germany. Even Vince with slap chop and all that stuff. He knew that German stuff was good.
Yeah, I mean, in the German, automobile manufacturing has been huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Volkswagen and Volvo, I think, right?
Yeah.
There's some
Although
other
not
kind of
without their
higher
own
end Mercedes.
yeah, not without their own controversy though. Faking the emissions.
Oh no, we were caught in the middle of that.
Yeah. I think you owned one of those.
Yeah, we had a turbo diesel. It's a
Yeah.
fucking rad car, dude. I mean, dude, it handled well. I just like the feeling of like the power of a diesel engine
Mhm.
under your foot is like a gasoline engine does not come close. Like you can feel, you can.
How was the turn radius? It was a really small car, right?
Yeah, it was just a Jetta, so it was a
Yeah.
compact or whatever you call that, a sedan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love having a good turn radius. When
yeah.
you're
I
on
mean,
small
it
streets and
handled
shit.
like any other midsize. I wouldn't
Yeah.
call it a compact, but it's just a midsize sedan. It handled like one. Um,
Eh,
I loved it, but yeah, they were like, "Yo, surprise, surprise! Like you're actually producing more emissions than we said you would." And then the settlement
You're not
wound up
as
being like,
green as you thought you were.
yeah, I forget exactly what it was, but it was like you can turn it in and get something different, or get like a credit for a new car that's different, or you could get it repaired or have the modification made.
Mm,
And the modification substantively impacted the fuel economy because in those diesels,
mhm.
like I think we were getting like 65 highway,
Ooh, that's pretty
which
good.
is like really fucking
That's
good. And
yeah,
we were getting like 35 in the city or something like that.
yeah.
And then when they made the changes to comply with clean air rules, then I think we were getting more like 40 on the highway, which is kind of more like most sedans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little more in line. All right. Well, let's listen to Richard Wolff.
All right.
I should explain that when the United States pressured Europe to cut off the inflow of Russian oil and gas, initially the Europeans were not at all interested in doing this. And it is important that you understand why, because you're going to see news in the next 6 to 12 months, which will otherwise be incomprehensible to you. The most important country in Europe, in terms of Europe as a totality, the one country that dominates, the richest, the most industrialized, is Germany. I mean, Germany is the core economic unit of all of Europe. And Germany was the major, not the only, but the major importer of Russian oil and gas. Russian oil and gas was priced very cheap. It meant that German industry, and it's an industrialized country, it's either the most important or the second most important exporter of manufactured goods in the world, this little country in the middle of Europe. They were able to compete around the world because their outputs were based on cheap energy. They could keep the prices of their goods lower than those of their competitors because they had the cheapest possible source of energy to run their factories and machines, namely Russian oil and gas. This started when there was still the Soviet Union. This was going on for decades. The embargo, the sanctions against Russia, which involved the Europeans cutting themselves off. And when the Europeans were hesitant, somebody, and you can guess as well as I can, blew up the pipeline in the North Sea to literally prevent the oil and gas. Even if they could reach the deal, couldn't get there because the pipelines were busted to carry it through. This hurt Germany. This hurt Germany badly. Germany's competitive edge was gone. It has to scramble around the world to get also alternative sources of energy. For example, it now buys liquefied natural gas from the United States, paying 3 or 4 times what it paid for comparable energy from Russia before. This is very bad for Germany, and German industry doesn't like it.
Fuck no, it doesn't.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're getting at, is that like Europe's almost being forced to deindustrialize because of lack of access to energy as cheap as it was. And like one of the central themes of this show is that like energy descent is simply a reality, right? And that there really aren't viable alternatives. There's certainly alternative energies that can make our standard of living as individuals in smaller communities better, but you're not going to power an industrial economy on those renewables. As we see it, we're not going to maintain this current arrangement without fossil fuels. That's just a fundamental reality.
And we've tried. I've looked into the different technologies for smelting ore and everything, and while there are electric alternatives, they require such vast sources of energy that you would basically need an entire giga plant worth of Tesla batteries to do it.
Yeah, right. And so and we've talked about the Nord Stream, and we mentioned in I think in one of those previous shows, because I think we've talked about it a couple times.
We have, yeah.
Big fucking deal. We mentioned how oh, imagine that. The US is like, oh, don't worry about not having natural gas from the North Sea,
We've got so much of that. We've just been burning it off.
Send you liquefied natural gas.
Yeah.
And at a profit, right? And so how the US basically destroyed the ability of Europe to get nearby energy. And instead we have a much more energy intensive delivery system of liquefied natural gas, where it has to, I believe, stay under pressure in
Yes.
specialized tankers to even move it,
And then
and
be
then
shipped
you
across the
ship it.
ocean.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And then be shipped across an ocean. And as we know, a lot of shit happens when you're crossing the
Yeah,
ocean.
it's
Just ask the
absolutely
people on the
fucking,
Titanic.
yeah, it's absolutely fucking absurd, and
Yeah.
that is a reality of our making, the United States. And I'm really surprised, and I hope maybe a little ways down the road when they grow a political spine, or when protesters finally change like who's in power and get someone that will be like, hey, we need to hold you accountable for this. Like, I don't want us to be sanctioned, but at this point, I'm just like, get it over with. Like, if
It might literally be the only thing to kind of get us to stop being such dicks.
yeah, we'll have to do a show where we talk a little bit about Robert F. Kennedy. I know kind of one of our objectives here is to steer clear of electoral politics, but his platform is pretty good, and in his platform is ending the American empire, quite literally, like closing overseas bases, making different defense arrangements so that people who rely on us for our military like are responsible for themselves, and all these other things. Anyway, we could talk about that, but yes, you're correct. Ending the American empire and kind of unraveling this world order um, needs to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. And the longer we let it go on, the more bullshit like this happens, where Europe is basically now deindustrializing. And I think I didn't look for the clip today, but I recall hearing last week or the week before that American politicians were being like, oh, energy's too expensive. You're needing to close plants. Go ahead and move them here. So it's almost as if like the United States is trying to reindustrialize by deindustrializing Europe.
That's what we'll do with all of the Rust Belt and
Remember?
all
We're
the
going to make
Midwestern
America great
states.
again and bring the
Yeah.
jobs back.
Yeah.
Right? And then how do we're like, oh, you don't have cheap energy from a pipeline? You can move here. We have cheap energy.
And we're working on taking away as many human rights as possible. Who's going to run those factories? Kids, that's who.
Kids,
Save
yeah. And
all
guess what?
kinds
There's
of
going to
fucking
be a
money.
lot of them because you can't fucking
Getting them.
with scramble with
It
brains
all
and
comes
keep it
full
out.
circle. It all comes full circle.
It comes full circle, man.
Like literally talked about this a year ago.
I mean, all of these things are
Oh,
connected,
God.
right? Because
Yeah.
our system is a system, and therefore, like, there's certain like we should have a discussion on what systems are and how they work,
Yeah.
and just kind of
And the
brainstorm on how.
interplay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and the interplay of them all.
Yeah, all of these.
And how you can make vast, predictions on linked systems.
Yep.
From an effect on one of them. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, we'll talk about it maybe in the future, but I definitely know that, like, me as a systems thinker, I think coming from air traffic, really facilitated me thinking in terms of systems, because, like, I know that, like, if you make an intervention that's more than you need, potentially it has cascading effects, and now you have a ton more interventions. So you're always trying to like run it really close.
Right.
Where like people are on approach, you're too close to the person in front of you, but I don't want you to slow down, and I don't want you to have to re-enter the sequence because that's going to screw up everything. So it's just like, go ahead and we use it in the AOR in Afghanistan all the time. We S curves, because all you're doing is adding more linear distance that you're flying by just kind of deviating this way a few hundred feet, deviating this
smart.
way. Yeah. And it helped slow them down, and build some distance between the guy in front of them. We use it all the time.
Makes perfect sense. If the shortest distance up between 2 points is a straight line, the easiest way to add more distance is to unstraighten that line.
Yeah,
unstraighten that line.
All right, now we're moving on to something from the I believe this is from the International Monetary Fund.
It absolutely is, and it is going to put everyone to sleep. I apologize.
I know it's so bad, but I think it covers some pretty good data.
It does.
So I wanted to include it. And IMF is kind of like a quasi public institution. So
surprisingly few followers, only like 182,000.
Yeah, because the IMF is part of the fucking global cabal.
There, it's 152,000.
Yeah, it's part of the global cabal, bro.
Yeah, it's part
But
of the
anyway, let's
Illuminati.
look at the regional economic outlook for.
Let's listen to what the
Europe.
Illuminati has to say.
Yeah.
Europe is facing a difficult task: bring down inflation, sustain economic growth, and maintain financial stability. All of this while countries still grapple with the fallout from the energy crisis caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Pause.
Economic growth has
So we're going to pause a lot, and that's going to be our strategy to work through this.
For this video, because it's dense and thick.
Yeah. Just want to point out, the energy crisis is caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which did prompt sanctions, among other things,
Right.
which did disrupt energy markets. But as we heard in that last clip, it was the United States deciding to blow up a pipeline that cut them off from energy that is really the crux of this.
Our words, not Richard Wolff's.
Yeah, ours, not Richard Wolff's. Go ahead.
slowed sharply. However, most countries have so far managed to escape a recession. This was thanks to falling energy prices, relief measures from governments.
Doesn't that just not make any sense? How are energy prices falling?
They're not, I don't think, and I don't know where that figure is. He might just mean for April 2023 falling relative to what they were like in September. And there's also like a demand component too, right? Like Europe is
they made it through the
this
winter.
winter in Europe was actually relatively mild, kind of creepily mild because of climate change, but generally they consume a lot more. So there might be a supply demand element to why natural gas prices are falling. Right, it's just seasonal. It's April, so like it's spring, so people
it's like quarterly thinking, basically. Yeah. Okay.
And easing supply chain bottlenecks. Unfortunately, inflation remains.
They're not easing supply chain bottlenecks. Shit are just getting back to the way they were 4 years ago.
Right.
I really hope they're not like, oh, look at everything we've done. And it's like, no, that's just the natural thing when everyone's not dying.
Right.
In double digits in most European emerging market economies and in some European advanced economies. Energy prices are falling,
just want to point out,
for many other
that inflation, I think inflation in Europe is higher than it is in the United States.
It is. I looked it up. It is currently 9.9% in February
versus US.
The US at the same time was 6.0.
Okay, so 3% higher inflation. 9%.
Yeah.
And is inflation an annually adjusted or is it monthly?
It depends on where you live, I think. We do it annually.
Okay, so near 10% means you add another 10% to the cost of everything over the course of that year.
Yeah.
And obviously the basket of goods, like things inflate at different rates, like housing and education and healthcare costs have been inflating for a very long time. And as we've talked about before, conveniently, that's not included in the figure where they get their lies, damned lies, and statistics.
Right. Lying with numbers. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's carry on.
Components of household expenses, prices are still increasing at a fast pace. This high inflation has led to the fastest increase in monetary policy rate in decades. And as interest rates rose, so did tensions in some corners of financial markets.
Pause there. Right, Europe is using the same tactic as the United States, which is like, oh my God, we have all this inflation because we printed too much money, basically. And there's other structural issues at play, right? But due in part to overinflated money supply and all this other stuff. But and greedflation, right?
Like, bailouts for corporations, PPP loans,
Right. And so Europe is doing the same thing as the US, which is like, we don't know how to respond. I guess we'll raise interest rates, which then just like chills everything out, but it's a pretty brutal process. Anyway.
Well, yeah, especially if you were just, thinking about or finally getting a loan for that house that you were after. And now you're like, oh, I went from 3% interest to like 7%. That's going to hugely inflate how much it costs me month to month.
Yep.
100%. The consequence, we have seen some global banking turbulence, which also affected European banks. High inflation.
So I'm not well versed on how instability in the global banking system has affected European banks, but they did lose one European bank, right?
Swedish. Was it a Swedish one?
Yeah. I want to say Credit Suisse needed a bailout or something.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Or Credit Suisse did the bailout. But I think there's been 4 major bank collapses in like 2 months.
Yeah, 3 here. We had Silicon Valley, and
First National,
something else. Yeah, and First National were the older ones, and then there was one like last week, I think. I believe it was based in San Francisco. Can't remember the name though. But
Okay.
yeah, it's another one that
1
failed.
in
And
Europe
that one,
and 3 in the United States.
yeah, and that one was actually no fault of its own. It was following all the rules. It just was insolvent. And like, I was reading some articles about it, and it's like, yeah, like banks can fail through no fault of their own, like following all the rules and everything.
Well,
'Cause it-
yeah.
Good.
And again, I'm not an expert. I'm pretty comfortable with the way it works. But my understanding is that one of the consequences of raising interest rates to try and slow down inflation
Mhm.
is that now assets that some banks had just been like, well, we are at like a practically 0% interest rate for
Yeah.
so long, and then all of a sudden they're paying whatever the Fed rate is, something like 4 or 5% or something like that. Now they're paying that when they've been paying next to zero for over a decade, since 2008, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, and
no fault of their own, but ultimately they just expected a reliable, secure asset to remain reliable and secure, and Fed policy changed and it's no longer secure.
yeah, and my understanding for some of it was that in order to kind of evidence that it's all a pyramid scheme, is in order to pay off their current, debts, they had to take out more debt from the Fed, and so they're paying out things that are at a lower interest rate with much higher interest rate money, and you just can't do that forever.
Right.
And tight financial conditions will slow down growth. We forecast growth in Europe will fall from 3.6% in 2022 to 0.7% this year in advanced economies, and from 4.4 to 1.1% in emerging economies. Here,
You might have missed it earlier, but they defined emerging economies as countries that were undergoing insecurity or warfare. And so they list like, I think, Turkey and Russia and Ukraine and one other one that I can't remember. But here it is, Belarus.
Yeah.
we are
Wait, hold
excluding
up.
Ukraine, Belarus.
I just want to point out that, like, because we have a debt-based system, like, it requires economic growth, and a rate of 0.7% is bad.
It's
Although,
practically degrowth.
yeah, it's practically zero. However, like, another theme of this show is that growth relies on a fossil fueled economy, and growth cannot be sustained on a finite planet indefinitely. And so, like, they're like, oh God, like, we'll still have economic growth, but it's a bad thing because we're not growing at 3%.
Right.
And we were just talking about the growth of inflation, and the difference of 3% is kind of a big deal, right?
Right.
In terms of like bringing new stuff online, so that they can service past debt, basically.
Yup. Oh, well.
We are excluding Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and Turkey. Economic growth should slowly pick up in 2024 to reach 1.4% in advanced economies and 3% in emerging economies. However, it will take a while for inflation to come down because the impact of tighter monetary policies will be felt only gradually. We project average inflation in 2024 at 3% in advanced European economies and 5.5% in emerging European economies. This is still above central bank targets. There are risks, of course. Failure to contain financial turbulence could lead to crisis and lower growth. High inflation could persist for even longer if energy prices spiked again, or wage growth picked up more than expected. So, what are policymakers to do? Bringing down inflation, sustaining economic growth, and maintaining financial stability requires monetary, fiscal, and structural policies to work together.
Pause there.
First,
those are ultimately, in my opinion, slightly educated but non-expert opinion, those are contradictory objectives.
Yeah.
As we're seeing, right? They raise rates slow down inflation and it hurts the banking sector.
Yeah, and it lowers growth. Yeah.
And it lowers growth. Right. And so they have three objectives that can't all be accomplished at the same time. Ultimately, let me ask you this, and it's a bit of a rhetorical question.
Oh,
but
okay.
like,
Well, I'm prepared not to
a
answer.
rhetorical question, please.
I'm prepared not to answer this question.
What do you think that they prioritize in that?
Millionaires.
Stability of the banking sector, economic growth, or inflation, which hurts everybody, but primarily hurts the masses.
I mean, I would think growth. I know I'm not supposed to answer, but I would think growth, because ultimately, the wealthy can ride out like even central banks failing because they're diversified and they're going to have money everywhere.
Yeah, I slightly disagree. I think that their number one priority is to continue to prop up the absolutely insanely fictitious banking system.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have lots of precedents in the last several decades that they will prioritize the banks over the people always.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, would they do it over growth? Because growth is typically, I don't care about growth. I'm broke. I don't get a share in that growth.
Right. Well, I think that growth is affected then if they prop up, like when they print a bunch of money and gave it to banks, that adds to growth because there's more money being exchanged in securities or whatever. Unfortunately, none of the financial policies have really been investments in new productive activities. That's a big reason why there was no real recovery after 2008. Because they just said, oh, we'll just make a bunch of money. And then they did stock buybacks and all that other bullshit and were never forced by policy to like take that and fucking lend it for reinvestment. They're just like, sure, it's just a fucking circle jerk of rich people passing money around themselves. But the way that economic growth is measured, and I remember taking it was a class in the religious studies department, actually, but it wound up being kind of on ethical issues and ethics in economics. It was really kind of interesting. But one of the things I remember when we were having like a unit on GDP and measurements, economic metrics of success. And one of the things was he's like, if a family gets divorced and now maintains 2 houses, maintains multiple vehicles, maintains 2 separate, banking accounts, 2 separate healthcare accounts, all this, then that's actually good for GDP. It's bad for society, but it's good for GDP. And that was kind of the purpose of that unit. It was to get us to question how we measure economic success and to critically look at it and make determination based on other factors whether it's actually truly a good thing. And I think that this is kind of a case in point.
Yeah.
All right,
can there be ethical consumption under capitalism?
There's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. Correct. Let's roll.
Monetary policy will need to remain tight for an extended period. Failure to bring inflation to targets would require more contractionary monetary policies later, making a more severe economic downturn likely. Second, maintaining financial stability will require close monitoring, strong supervision, contingency planning, and prompt action where needed to strengthen capital and liquidity buffers.
I think prompt action they got down after 2008, because when SVB went down, dude, it was like 2 days later the federal government's like, oh, don't worry about it, well, we got it, right? But do those other 2 factors he mentioned, not so much. Can you back it up just a sec?
Yeah.
What were the other 2?
Require close monitoring, strong supervision,
monitoring and supervision,
planning,
contingency planning. Absolute bullshit. They don't have another plan. They just bail them out, and they might have some superfluous legislation that makes minor tweaks. But in terms of monitoring and supervision, I don't know. I haven't seen any fundamental change, and I'm not sure about Europe in particular in the European Central Bank, but I imagine it's the financial system being a transnational globalized system is probably very similar to what we're more familiar with here in the United States, which is the banks don't have very little oversight and supervision over them. In fact, in this and little contingency planning, right? They just like, okay, shit. Yeah, we have the FDIC, and it was, as we discussed before, it had this purpose and this history, and this is why we did it. But then they're just like, oh, fuck it. It's more important that we just like don't even listen to the laws we have on the books and just do this thing right now.
Yeah, well, and the bank's responses are usually just not even the banks, the people that regulate the banks. Their responses are always interesting and disconnected from reality. Like when we needed to have more savings and liquidity in banks, they made something called Regulation D that just said, "Oh, you can only get 6 transfers from your savings account every month because we want you to leave it in savings, not spend it." Well, I can tell you as someone who needs access to my money, I'm just going to stop putting money in the savings account because the interest rate on the savings account is bullshit to begin with. It's fractions of a percent. So like, why even? But I've opened up credit union accounts and been like, do I need to get the savings account? And they're like, it is a required product.
Yeah. Yep.
But
you're
I don't
required.
use it. Yeah, but I don't use it.
Yep. My balance in my in my savings account is 1% of my checking.
Oh, for me, it's the $5 minimum they require.
Oh yeah, I got a couple in there, but
you actually physically can't transfer that last $5 out. They won't let you.
Nice. All right, let's carry on.
And prompt action were needed to strengthen capital and liquidity buffers. We also need to complete the European Banking Union. Third, more ambitious fiscal consolidation would help central banks meet their objectives at lower interest rates. This would support financial sector stability and help governments build buffers for future shocks.
Consolidation of what?
Fiscal generally refers to budgets, but I'm wondering, it almost sounds like he means like ensuring that the balance sheets of smaller banks are in line with the larger banks. I don't quite understand that one, but the first one is just has contradictory objectives. The second one, history and practice tells us they're not going to fucking do it. And what did you discover here?
It says fiscal consolidation. It describes government policy intended to reduce deficits and the accumulation of debt. So first of all, you can be assured that's going to affect the poorer, more southern countries more than it will our northern countries. And then it says, how does it affect inflation? It is about limiting debt. The overall fiscal balance affects the demand for goods and service and inflationary pressures. A smaller deficit cools aggregate demand and inflation. So that way they don't have to raise interest rates as much.
So if I'm understanding correctly, more ambitious fiscal consolidation is Orwellian for austerity.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it sounds like austerity. And that is why I naturally think it's going to affect places like Greece, who have had problems with undergoing austerity in order to pay their debts. So I have a feeling they're just going to. So I think they're just going to crack down even more on countries that have already suffered. So watch out.
Far, the 3 things he's listed. The first one are a bunch of objectives that are contradictory, and so you can't have them all at once. The second is these nice ideas, rosy ideas of us actually like holding banks accountable, which we know is bullshit.
Right.
And the third one is austerity. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there a fourth one?
Let's find out.
And finally, structural reforms should prioritize supporting growth and reducing inflation. We need to help people join or stay in the labor market, and we need investments to lift Europe's productive capacity and speed up the green transition.
Which you can't do.
This is an ambitious set of policy actions.
Say again.
He said social reforms to ensure people stay in the workforce, which is a lot like the United States, requiring you to work 20 hours a week to qualify for assistance.
Yeah, exactly. So you can better believe there's going to be more austerity in the future.
More austerity.
Fewer people who probably shouldn't be in the workforce. I have to wonder how long before they're trying to take reduce maternity and paternity leave, and then how many buildings the French will burn to protest that. Hopefully a lot.
Yeah, we're almost done with this so we can get on to some riot porn.
Yeah, it's not as bad.
But implemented together, It will make the European economy stronger and safer.
By European economy, he means the financial elite.
Yeah.
It will make the elite more prosperous if we impose austerity, if we bail out the banks every time they fucking need it, and if we ensure that the system continues to operate for us.
Barely, basically.
Nothing into social reforms.
Yeah.
It's the whole fucking system is so broken, dude. Like I recorded a podcast with my friend Jim last Thursday, and he kind of was like, "Oh, is the system too broken, or can we fix it?" And I was like, "It's not really broken. It's operating according to its fucking rules. It's the rules that are fucked up."
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that is the system. The system is the rules.
It's not broken though. It operates.
It is working exactly as intended, and that is to funnel money to few.
Yeah, to accumulate wealth towards the top. Yeah, exactly.
In the pyramid scheme, that is capitalism. Yes,
that is capitalism.
Yeah.
All right, let's watch some riot porn.
Dude, they're British. They don't riot. They send strongly worded letters and maybe raise their voice.
Yeah, I guess
I'm gonna say
much. You don't. Oh, this is about the fucking monarchy.
It's about the monarchy. Yeah. So I'm going to say, first of all, I love that sign because what comes before the apostrophe?
Fucking.
Yep. Fucking parasite.
Parasite.
So they're insulting, but ever so British.
Ever so British.
Hashtag not my king. Just borrowing ideas from fucking Trumpers. Not my president.
Or I mean, but yeah, I remember when Mark Hamill was like, "This isn't my Star Wars.
This isn't my Luke."
Yeah,
not my Luke.
And other people were like, "Yeah, this is not my Star Wars."
That was Frank Skywalker.
Yeah, Jake, I think he said.
Jake Skywalker.
Yeah, this is a story. Maybe Jake Skywalker. This isn't Luke. It's like, shut the fuck up.
It was a bad movie, though.
Officers have been given new powers just this week to stop and search. The government insisting the timing is merely coincidental. Rishi Sunak attended a Downing Street party today to continue the coronation celebrations. And under his new Public Order Act, police can stop and search protesters if they merely suspect they're setting out to cause chaos.
I worry that this really sends out the wrong message to innocent people across this country who want to express their fundamental human rights to free speech and to freedom of assembly and to engage in peaceful protest.
The government say these new laws are nothing to do with the coronation, that the nature of protests have become more disruptive and intrusive. The public will now decide whether the cavalry they saw summoned yesterday by the Met was proportionate.
Yeah, so basically the police have been given the right to determine that anything that they please is causing chaos. Very broad wording. What the hell does that even mean?
Yep.
Anything that is a disorder, and the order is determined by them. So anything. And then it was utilized in very bizarre ways for shit that was really, really far from the actual coronation. And it was almost as though they were just like, oh, sweep all the undesirables off the street.
Well, Extinction Rebellion has been doing one of their more recent like mass protests, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I coming through fuzzy on your end?
Nope.
Okay. My image just looks fuzzy on my dashboard here. No problem. Yeah, I think Extinction Rebellion's doing some stuff. I remember like randomly in my YouTube feed popping up, it's like protesters disrupting this like famous horse race or something. It's like annual horse race, and they were fucking around and like jumping fences and trying to stop this horse race but they were like animal rights activists, not climate protesters.
Yeah. Oh,
They're
nice.
the ones that's like, how dare you make a horse run even though it's literally built for running and that's its entire instinct is to fucking run, but how dare you run with the horse? Fucking animal rights activists, bro.
Maybe if the people actually ran alongside the horse, so like the jockey had to be fucking good at running too. Just kind of holding on.
Yeah. Or what about like greyhounds chasing a little mechanical rabbit? Oh, we don't like greyhound racing. It's like, bro, those dogs, like, if they're good at what they do they get to freaking have like the best nutrition, the best health care. They get to like they get bred so they don't
That's
get
the important one.
Nuts cut off. They actually get paid to go fucking bust a nut. Like, it's a good fucking life for a dog. Come on.
Yeah.
It'd be a good life for a human being. You know, give me high quality food, you know, all that other shit. Anyway,
Pay me to
fucking
bone.
animal protesters just trying to disrupt a goddamn horse race when horses literally, that is their prime instinct, is to fucking run.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Anyway.
I do like, so I don't remember if it gets shown in the video or not. I got one more piece of this,
Sure.
but the height of their protesting is, some people are going along willingly, you know, the police, and other people are just like, carry me. I'm not going to walk. My legs suddenly don't work. And there's like 6 people carrying them along.
Yeah, that's a kind of protest tactic to like
Yeah.
dead weight and make it
Yeah.
harder for them and make them exert more energy, right?
Yeah,
Because they're
more
still
effort.
human beings.
Yeah.
And they're out there. So the more you make them work, the more you exhaust them, the
Yeah.
sooner they're going to have to be on the taking a break. Basically.
Yeah, and if you can tie up 6 dudes for your one, you're winning.
That's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that there's been a protests have been growing everywhere.
Right.
And I just kind of conceive of this erosion of civil liberties in the UK, akin to the erosion of civil liberties here with the Patriot Act, and more recently, I don't think it's passed yet, but they're trying to pass. Fuck, help me out, bro. The
Is it
one
the
that'll ban
TikTok one?
VPNs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget
it's
what
a
they
TikTok
call
one.
it.
I can't remember.
Yeah, but anyway, you know, other rules to like erode privacy and other things.
And very broad, just like these rules.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh yeah, anything. It's like, well, what does that mean? Is it this? Probably. What about this? Probably.
The elite knows that this is it. Like they've
Right.
known that these moments were coming for forever, right?
Yeah.
They knew the party was going to have to come to an end at some point. And so that's why the last couple decades have been nothing but a scramble to fucking loot as much of the public good as they could, because they knew the shit was going to fall apart. They were just trying to position themselves to keep their status and privilege once it all unraveled.
And to control information. Because banning VPNs, they say it's, well, we don't want you to get access to TikTok. And it's like, look, man, if someone's going through the trouble of getting a subscription to a VPN just so they can use TikTok, I applaud their conviction. Let them have TikTok.
Yeah.
But really, it's more along the lines of like, well, TikTok and platforms like it allow our citizens to see that they are not in the greatest nation on earth, that in fact many other nations on the earth have more freedoms, better, you know, health results, and more rights.
Yep.
And so, yeah, no wonder we're trying to do it. You know what? China did the same thing with the Great Firewall of China, and we fucking breathed fire about that. We're like, look at them, they're taking away all the rights and everything.
Dude,
Just
we
like,
seriously live in 1984, I'm convinced.
oh yeah.
It's like we're just blame China's an authoritarian state. Look at all this fucking shit they did.
Yeah.
Right. While they basically do that, or like, oh, look at how
damn, that was a good
China
idea.
is. You can't breathe the air. Is like fucking people are literally like dying of cancers because of fucking train accidents and shit. Like it's fucking, or drinking lead water or whatever it is. Like,
Right. Yeah.
it's fucking absurd. Anyway, you want to play the second half of this?
Yeah.
I thought we were gonna get
Some of your fellow.
What was that?
Oh, nothing.
No, I'm
Complain.
sorry. I don't have any riot porn. The French weren't doing much this week, or at least
Play this clip, and while we do that, you better be looking for fucking. I want to see more like shit on fire,
Protesters have
bro.
compared the police action to that in Russia or totalitarian regimes. Surely an insult to people there who literally can't go out and protest as we can here.
We no longer have the right to protest. Our protest is a freedom which is contingent on political decisions made by senior police officers and the government. So if they wish to stop a protest from carrying on, they have now the means to stop it without any serious evidence or concern. The law is so broad and so wide-sweeping, and their power is so undefined or ill-defined, they can simply decide to stop a protest.
When you look at what some of the environmental activists have done, throwing soup on a Van Gogh painting or powder paint on a snooker table, stopping people getting to hospital, would you accept that the actions of other protesters, other groups, have actually made life more difficult for you and brought in these laws that you've now fallen foul of?
Well, I don't think there's any justification for the new laws. I mean, the police already have sweeping powers to deal with these protesters. And also, we are a free country and we should be able to protest. Yes, Sometimes people go too far. Yes, sometimes people are angry by the inconvenience, but protest has to, in some way, have an impact. And if you're only allowed to do protest which has no impact, that's no protest at all.
Yeah, right there. It's that's in America, it's like, hey, you're protesting the wrong way. You need to get permits, go to a pre-approved area where no one will see you and protest over there. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, man.
Or
Hey,
one
this
of my
guy's got it right. Like,
one of
make
my
shit inconvenient.
favorites is, 5 people involved in looting a liquor store out of thousands of people at a fucking protest. And the
Right.
way the media is like, oh my God, these people are out of control. You got to get them off the street and not let them
These
do
violent
that.
protesters. Yeah.
And the reality is, fuck that. I say more looting. I'm sorry, small businesses get hurt, dude. But like, the only way this works, you as a small business person, I might have said this before, but you as a small business person, if you want to protect your livelihood and all that other stuff, you know what you need to do? You need to fucking force your local politicians to change the fucking laws and be like, hey, I think that what they're asking isn't that big of a deal. Give it to them so they don't fucking come loot my store.
Also, we need to learn to loot more selectively. And like, once we get everyone fired up, let's get everyone in vans and go to the rich people's homes.
Yeah.
Loot there.
There was a viral clip of a young woman in Minneapolis. And I remember John Oliver picked it up as for like one of his, and now this, where he does like a short clip.
Yeah.
And she was like going off, and like the person interviewing, I think it was CNN or something, was like, oh, and like, how do you feel about, your community being, looted and burned down? And they were standing in front of a fucking Target that got looted. And she's like, this shit ain't ours. This is fucking isn't ours. This doesn't belong to us. This isn't our community. They just
think we own
come
any
and
of
put
this
it here
shit?
and extract dollars from our community while providing shit fucking wages.
Yeah.
And I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
No, and well, it's that sort of awareness that I love to see, because that really is just admitting that, like, hey, while it might affect me, it is not actually all that affecting to me. Like, sure, I can't go to Target. That's inconvenient. Whatever, they're overpriced anyway, and their clothing line sucks. But I kind of want nice stuff, and this is what it's going to take.
I mean, even then, in that case, they just don't want to get fucking murdered for being black or brown.
Yeah.
And that's the thing,
really
too, is that like cops already have all this fucking power. All you did was justify their use of force.
Right. Well, I remember.
You excused it. Sorry, go ahead.
And a lot of times they already have abilities that cover what's being introduced in the new law. I think in Chico, they were trying to establish a law that would allow police officers to pull over anyone who was ghost riding a bike on assumption of theft. And it's like, you already have that ability. It's called assumption of like you have the ability to say, hey, something's wrong here. Why you have 2 bikes? Like, that's a questionable thing. And that there were already laws that allowed police officers to pull them over. They just wanted it codified that they could harass poor people more easily and not get any blowback, as they wouldn't have to justify it and say, oh, I thought it was suspicious, and so I investigated. They're like, nope, that's automatically suspicious.
Yep.
And I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, because then they do it for everybody instead of their application of that rule revealing that they're fucking racist.
Right. And in this instance here,
it's not because you're black and I think you stole it. It's because we just don't allow people to do this without.
I have to pull you over. If you're ghost riding a bike, I'm required to. My boss told me. But yeah, in this instance, in Britain, like, if you see people that are causing actual like physical harm to others, or who are impeding traffic, there's already laws about doing those things. You don't need it. They just want to be able to do it indiscriminately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Do you have any more other stuff on? Because this was kind of about the coronation, which, in all fairness, like a lot of Charles, not a fucking popular guy, because he was a piece of shit to Diana, and everybody.
And everyone loved his mother too.
What's that?
And everyone loved his mother too.
Yeah, and they loved his mother, and they loved his ex-wife, right? Yeah. And they knew he's kind of a big piece of shit, and his brother, was on Epstein's island and just settled. Like, and the media has like consistently covered for the royal family, and I think people are genuinely fucking tired of it. I mean, they're so fucking tired of it. Then a member of the royal family was like, you know what? Fuck y'all. I'm done.
Yeah. I'm going to take my millions and leave.
Yeah, I'm just going to take my Twitter followers. And
Yeah.
then we're going to do, did you see the South Park? They were making fun of them.
No.
Yeah, they were just
I got to
like,
start watching. I'm
we
trying.
didn't want to be left alone.
Yeah.
I think they might have pulled South Park off of HBO Max.
It is on HBO Max now.
It is?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
They might be going through a dispute though.
Oh, okay.
Because we were trying to watch South Park last night and we're like, where the fuck is it? And it didn't come up in the search.
Maybe they'll put it on Netflix.
Maybe they'll put it on Netflix.
Yeah. You know, they can get it for free.
Yeah, I think it was a disagreement between HBO and Paramount, which has the distribution rights of South Park. So it'll probably come back up, but they're probably just negotiating more pay or something.
So for clips, I didn't have anything more actually, you know, related. I did have a little, you know, funny one though.
Yeah, sure. I'm down for some funny.
So
it's Coronation labeled stuff.
It's slightly related to.
I don't care about the royal family. You seem to care a lot about the royal family.
No, I care about the descent, but you know, this is actually, yeah, you know, pretty funny though, because they say it's the Grim Reaper. But I don't. You know what I see?
What?
Force Pike. I see an Imperial Royal Guard. But the lighting's a little off. You can't tell that it's red. And that right there is an Imperial Guard.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw another one Jimmy Dore covered. They protesters had gone to the place where the coronation was going to be, and then fucking like, I don't know if they like poured chemicals or otherwise like mowed it or something, but they basically just drew really giant dicks.
Penis, yeah, the cock and balls. Yeah.
Which is also very British.
This one I thought was incredibly funny. My wife pointed it out to me.
This is Snoke versus who is that? Like a bishop or something?
No, that's
Charles.
That's Charles.
Man, he's already so fucking old.
He's already so fucking old. Yeah, like.
And so who succeeds him? William and Kate?
Well, see, that's the thing is I don't care. Who will succeed?
And you know, because I haven't commented on people's
William
in a while.
William
is William
Wales. Yeah.
William is not a very attractive man, but Kate Middleton.
She's a good one I can get along with. Yeah.
I actually wound up reading up on her because I couldn't figure out, but not royal, but they also comes from like money, right? Like,
yeah.
And so, you know, I'm glad that they're diversifying their genetics because for a long time they did not.
And that's how we got Snoke. I did find some riot porn, but it's nothing that is, you know, specific. It's just the French. Police posing. There was there were a lot of gifs and stuff going around of you know, French police being like, you know, provocative, like you know, coming at people, raising the batons, you know, like saying insulting stuff, and like they're just trying to draw people into a fight at this point so they can, you know, beat them, arrest them, and you know, not have to deal with them anymore. But yeah, it's pretty bad. They're still going under it. This is from the Mayday stuff. It says it's live though. So like, are they still rioting? I would believe that.
Oh no, they're pretty much in the constant thing about I think they take breaks.
Yeah.
You know, they regroup, they replan action.
They're like, all right, we'll go.
But I absolutely expect this to continue indefinitely. And I think that in the United States, it's going to pick up again probably this summer or potentially this fall. I simply don't see how the cost of goods could increase so damn much in such a short period of time while everybody is already economically precarious due to some like structural rearrangements, major industries laying people off, etc., etc., etc. Right?
Right. Well, and greedflation is the word of the year. It's used to describe the fact that like the cost of things aren't going up for the companies that are supplying us with goods; they're just pulling in more profits. And using the fact that the media has been priming Americans for a recession and for inflation for so long that when prices do go up, we're like, well, I do remember them saying prices were going to go up, so that makes sense. So I guess this is normal.
Yeah, and I don't know, dude. I genuinely think that, like, I don't know. We're near a fucking breaking point, though. I simply don't. I don't see how. I don't see any reforms being made that are meaningful enough to shift public perception away from like a constant state of rage.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then you've got people like, Bernie's still coming out with, minimum wage increases and stuff like that. And it's like, it's always like you couldn't even get 15, and now he's like, oh, it's got to be 17 or 18 or something like that. It's basically just an ever increasing number that's pegged to nothing. And so he's basically proposing a fight like every 5 to 10 years to increase it rather than saying, we want it here and we want it, pegged to inflation. So it just rises and falls with inflation, which would hopefully encourage business owners to want low inflation, since that means they'd have to pay people less.
I have no idea. I think
It's all crazy.
Yeah, and I think that like the American political system too, so far what I'm seeing, it's obviously really early. And again, we don't want to dwell on electoral politics because it doesn't really matter. But there could be some consequential stuff come out of it. I think that RFK Jr. is already really popular and has very, very, very broad appeal. Because I'm in forums and stuff looking at people, and there's a lot of people who are older, conservative, etc., that are like, this guy is a breath of fresh air, blah 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 blah. Like, this guy would be great. I would vote for him. Meaning, like, he has the ability to win a majority in a general election, but he's decided to run as a Democrat, and the Democrats are like, there will be no debates. Joe Biden is running, and he is our nominee.
Right.
There
Which
won't
is just
be any challenges. That's not how this works.
right. And it's the stupidest shit. I don't want to vote for that guy.
And genuinely, like, unless he fucking croaks on the campaign trail, like they're gonna manipulate elections, right? And then they're gonna go to convention and they're gonna pick Joe Biden, and we're gonna have Joe Biden versus some fucking idiot Republican. If they're smart, they'll do someone like Haley, who's like less controversial than DeSantis and Trump, right? But either way, it looks like it might be a rematch of Trump versus Biden, and Biden is fucking incoherent.
Yeah, I mean, they both are, is the thing,
Yeah, Trump's not much better.
If better at all.
I think he's a little bit more
I've heard them. Joe Biden tends to trail off as though he kind of like lost what he was thinking about, and that I can understand. Trump would be in the middle of a sentence and lose it and just go like really far back or completely change the subject. And so like you could tell that his mind just snapped and he was like, I don't even know where I am or what I'm talking about.
I think there might be a grain of truth to that. I think that it's a rhetorical style too, though. Because if you listen, like one of the cooler videos I saw, because I was not one of those orange man bad, like,
yeah,
I didn't freak out, but I did see a really, really interesting video about cult thinking, cult leaders, and it was taking Trump's rhetorical style and comparing it to that of Charles Manson. And it was really fascinating that there were this 5 or 6 different concrete elements that Trump used in his rhetorical style.
Yeah.
Which includes kind of rambling and then just like free thinking kind of flow without any kind of organization to the thoughts. It just goes, and sometimes it like trails off and then runs back, and it's all over the place.
I mean, that also gets you to the point, where someone says something like, oh, I don't know how they could possibly, get over a taller wall, maybe taller ladders. Then they have to get down, and I don't know how that could work. Maybe a rope.
Yeah, he's just kind of like going through it in his head in real time.
He's like, oh, shit.
There was
Eh,
something recently he was selling some kind of thing like commemorative Trump coins or something, whatever.
Trump
And
coin.
you can't claim the guy doesn't have a hustle because he fucking
Yeah.
hustles. But
I'm surprised he hasn't done an ICO on Trump coin cryptocurrency.
I know, right?
Built more millions out of people.
No, but I recall seeing one where he was like talking about something and he kind of like trailed off. I think it was like about estate planning or something like that. Anyway, he starts talking shit about his kids. He's like, unless you're, unless you don't want to leave stuff for your kids because they don't talk to you or you don't like them. And then he's kind of like, you could kind of almost see like he stopped for a second and then got back to his point. But you can almost see his brain turning, being like, yeah, I really hate those fucking bastards. He just spent the whole time talking shit about his kids.
Probably gonna leave it all to or to
Ivanka?
the blonde one. Yeah. I don't know her name. yeah. I'll leave it all to her
Yeah, maybe.
because he's physically attracted to her.
Which is fucking, it's gross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but also his other sons
that's
probably made a lot of bad business decisions.
Yeah,
Ivanka
but I mean,
does seem
this
to have the one who's like her hustle has kind of succeeded in more
Yeah.
ways than her brothers.
Yeah, she's actually got some businesses that
She might
are functioning.
Yeah, she might be a better business person than her brothers, and that's
Yeah.
completely reasonable.
I mean, totally reasonable. She wasn't in the spotlight as much, so she had more time to focus on her own shit.
Right. So anyway, today we talked about the economic situation in Europe, bro. It's not going to get any better. And of course, governments are passing laws to make it, easier for police to dispel protests, because the elite know that more protests are coming, because their economic plan, as we discussed today, is like not
Not a
rooted
plan.
in reality, and they're going to lean heavily into bailing out those banks and austerity for the rest of us, right?
Yep.
That was the best slogan out of the Occupy Wall Street movement. Banks got bailed out, we got sold out. One of my favorite. A lot better than we are the 99%, honestly.
Oh yeah, I mean, socialism for the rich, ruthless capitalism for the poor. I like that.
Rugged individualism for the poor.
There you go. Rugged
Yeah,
individualism.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? When liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause.
Thank you, my friend. That was a nice, clean, short, barely over an hour. Perfect.
Yeah. This is what we got to aim for. We're
Aiming
doing
for
well.
an hour just to keep interest in that way. It's actually easier to fucking produce it too.
Absolutely is.
Like long streams, I do appreciate the opportunity to fucking get drunk and ramble, but I like an hour stream too. Anyway,
Yep.
Peace. Much love.
Later, y'all. All right, we're no longer live.